Welcome, everyone, to Los Libertinos podcast. My name is Carlos Avelar. I am your host. This is Chingazos and Fire, episode number 5.0. Our guest today is Thad Russell. He is the founder and CEO of Renegade University. He is the host of the Unregistered podcast, and he is the author of A Renegade History of the United States, which I'm holding right here. And also, I believe he's also, there's probably a few, but there has to be less than a handful Black drag queen historians in the country. That's kind of a cool, unique one. And to me, someone that I admire and someone that definitely in the arena of ideas, he definitely likes to throw chingazos. So we're happy to have him here. Welcome, Thad.
Oh man, thank you, Carlos. That's a beautiful introduction. I haven't gotten an introduction that good in a long time, man.
Oh, okay,
it means
man.
a lot to me.
Well, coming for you, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm new at this game, and I have subscribers that are, I'm trying to build up my numbers, and thank you for being on. I would like to think that half of my subscribers are people that might know who you are and know some of your background, and the other half are probably like all my primos and primas and friends and all that stuff, so they don't know who you are. So could you please give a background into kind of where you were born, raised, some of your upbringing, family, and how you kind of navigated to get to a point where you kind of wrote this book, and then you are now on this journey of of being a renegade in all the schooling and the book and in your podcast.
Wow. Yeah. So I was born in Berkeley, California, in the San Francisco Bay Area in 1965. My parents were radical socialists, revolutionaries, and they actually, when I was about 5 or 6 years old, my mother and stepfather got jobs in heavy industry. Like my stepfather became a steel worker, and then he was a truck driver for many years. And my mother worked as a clerk when they were highly educated, middle-class people, sort of cultural elite types, actually, because they were going to organize the workers for revolution, like this hilarious idea among like really hardcore Marxist groups back then. I don't know if they still do that. I think they might, but it was a big deal back in the 60s and 70s. Marxist groups would do that, actually. It's this weird, like really underground subculture that no one knows anything about. So that's my point, is that's how hardcore they were into that. They were not hardcore into being parents. So, like every time I debate a socialist or just hang out with a socialist who knows about my past, they assume that everything I'm doing is like an Oedipal struggle, like trying to kill my parents in a way. And that could be true. I mean, I don't know. It's then again, like my parents were political in the 60s. They started out being opposed to the Vietnam War. Like that's the thing that I care about the most, They protested for free speech on the UC Berkeley campus. That's like one of the things I care about the most. My mother was in sit-ins to desegregate spaces here in the Bay Area. That's something I care about the most, right? Like we all agree, those are fantastic fucking causes. That wouldn't it be great if the left cared about them now? Things like that. Like Jesus Christ, we all agree on that stuff now. But certainly like anybody on the left and any libertarian would immediately coalesce around those issues. And those are huge issues. But so that was the left then when my parents were in the left. So I guess in a way, like I'm just trying to get them. I want not my parents, but like the left in general to like go back to that. I'm not trying to demolish them or kill them. Yeah, no, not at all. I want the left of the counterculture of the 60s, when it was for these beautiful, beautiful causes. My God, like ending the war, and then also like sexual liberation. That was also what the left was doing. And that was when feminism was real. That's when then there really was a patriarchy. That's really when women were kept out of like occupations. Like, that was real in the 1960s. They allowed to do like large sections of society. That was a big deal. Like we're all down with that. We're all really down with that.
And you're proud of that too, obviously, right? I mean, you're very proud of that.
Yeah.
That part,
And now the left is a bunch of psychotic fucking asshole authoritarians. Like there's like nothing good about it. Not a fucking dude.
Yeah.
Not
So
one thing.
So we'll get to that, but I've heard you say that you were part of the first school system that had like the integration of the busing and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that's kind of some of the stuff of your upbringing that I'm gonna know more of this stuff because I've been following you for a long time. So I want to get into the weeds of that a little bit. Because I'd like I said, my primos and tios and all that, I'd be like, oh man, that dude definitely had a life, something that a little different than we would have gone through, especially Latinos or whatever. Like, so can you speak a little bit of that as you kind of go through that journey here with me a little bit?
Yeah. So
your journey.
Yeah. So in one of the early Democratic primary debates, this might have been in 2018, but it was for the 2020 presidential election. It was early on. I know this because Kamala Harris was in it and she was the first one to drop out. So it must have been one of the big moment of the night was when she called out Joe Biden racist. And because of his hanging out with Ku Klux Klan, Robert Byrd and all that shit, actually silly shit. But but she tells it, she does it. She had this story prepared where she says, Joe, there was a little girl in California who I forget what she said, but got on the bus every day and was taken across town to racially integrate the schools, and she talked about it as if it was this wonderful, magical thing, this heroic, wonderful thing that the city did. And that's why, what he said was such an insult to her civil rights legacy as being part of this civil rights. And that's certainly how, well, I don't know. I'm not sure how I thought about busing back in the day, but yes. So anyway, Kamala Harris and I were born and raised in almost the same neighborhood, about 2 neighborhoods away. She was in West Berkeley. I was in Southwest Berkeley. We're the same age exactly. I think within a year, and I believe we were the same class. So I think we were in kindergarten at the same time. Berkeley was the first city in the world, first city in the world to bus school children for the purpose of racial integration. So I got on a bus and went from my dad's house across town to Columbus, and she got on a bus and went across town to Thousand Oaks.
What does that mean? So you went from what side? Like what? How did it? What do you mean by that?
Well,
like what was what was the colors that were interchanging here?
I mean, it didn't even make that much sense because like the neighborhood I lived in, some of the time, like half the time, my childhood was 60 to 70% black. So, but they would bus us as a black neighborhood, right? Because it wasn't like by house. I guess I don't remember how they did it, but yeah, I mean, it was. But anyway, I mean, the point is, it was a big social engineering project with children. I mean, fuck that about race. Ugh. Like that's Nazi shit. Like think about this. Putting children on buses, number one. The government putting children on buses. Number one, put that image in your head. What does that look like? Huh? Ever seen anything look like that in the past? Right? For a racial social engineering experiment? What the fuck does that sound like? That's straight Nazi shit. Now, they weren't being taken to death camps. So, that's different. But that's not all the Nazis were doing. The Nazis were also trying to perfect their race. They were doing all kinds of racialist science bullshit like this using human beings. And a lot of it they thought was positive for the Aryans. They did experiments with Aryans. There was all sorts of, they did eugenics. They sterilized some people. They did all sorts of manipulation of human bodies Aryans, non-Aryans, to, for all sorts of purposes. So it's part of that web of Nazi science. Absolutely, in my view.
Did your educated parents agree with the busing? Or it was just that it was part of the school system, so you just got to do it?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I don't remember any discussion by them about it. I know that my best friend's parents didn't like it, and I remember thinking, that was like a conservative idea they have, because Berkeley's a cult, yo. Like, it's a big church here. We don't have Republicans. I didn't know a Republican until I went to college. I never met one. I never met a Republican. I didn't know a Christian. I didn't know a practicing Christian or a Republican until I was in college. It's insane here. Like, you're in such a bubble. So, and my buddy's parents were total liberals, but they had this like one idea. They just didn't like that. They didn't like, there were a couple of things where they were like on the side of the Republicans. I was like, ooh, they're not like quite right. My parents, I don't know. They had shitty politics, obviously, on a lot of stuff, but on race, actually, my mother especially has been more skeptical than a lot of people about this anti-racism woke shit. So, she's actually been pretty good in terms of being like more clear-eyed about what's been going on with racial politics than a lot of lefties have been. But
your schooling, the busing or all that part, was it was elementary, middle school, high school? You did all that through that, or was it just
you want to know the funny shit though? Sometimes people, the only actual racists I've known in my life who I'm like pretty much sure are racist, like real racist, like, are my mother and father. both my dad used the N-word like meaning it. Not like quoting rap lyrics. Like, he meant that shit with the hard R, at the end. And my mother definitely has said things that were racist. So
what did that mean to you? What did that mean to you back then? If there were, yeah, I've heard it too. I've heard it too, but yeah, I guess never really I haven't heard too much of the hard R stuff.
I know, but these I'm talking about, these are like lefty, like civil rights leaders, my mother's in like a movie. You can see her. It's a big documentary called Berkeley in the 60s. And she's in it. She's like, you can see her like at a sit-in, like protesting segregated lunch counter in Oakland, where I live now. But yeah, she's racist.
Yeah, that's I like to.
No, she definitely is. No, I was just thinking about just something like she did like about 6 months ago. She hired some black dudes from East Oakland to like move her furniture, and I came over to like help out, and she was just like, "Oh my God." And I said, "What's the matter?" She said, "Oh man, the weed. Oh God." And I said, "Oh really? Okay, whatever. It's just, they're just moving your fucking furniture. Who cares?" She said, "Well, they're from East Oakland." But I don't know. It just, yeah. Anyway, sorry.
But if you took, well, I have this thing where I say that if you go to a comedy show and laugh at racist jokes, to me, you're not racist. But if you were able to take your mom to a comedy show and you would sit right next to her and listen to racist jokes, which a lot of comedy is about, like, kind of, has the racist overtones, the stereotyping, and it's funny. To me, the word, the racist charge it's too dense, because you're saying it right now. You're almost talking about it, that, your parents were probably doing a lot of stuff, what they thought were probably was to advance some bad social government policies, but they were saying, like you said, the N-word and all that. But you're saying maybe they were racist, but sometimes people are just the way they are, but their actions sometimes speak louder than words, and their words that are kind of in the background shouldn't be the forefront of what they are,
Well, let me throw out a theory that I just came up with as you were speaking. So my parents, were the adults that I knew most intimately, right? Obviously. Or I should say, I knew them more intimately than maybe anyone because I knew them for long, although I only lived with each one half my childhood because they split when I was 5, but and I went back and forth basically, but you know, like I saw them like up close and personal, right? Like we know our parents in that way. And they got plenty of white guilt shit going on. Like they're not as bad as some people, but they got it, you know. Like I remember my mother saying how much she would cry during the Jesse Jackson campaign of 1984 and 1988, you know. Um I think I think that white liberal racial politics is all basically an expression of white guilt about like actual like fleeting racist feelings and thoughts, like what my mother and father had. I taught them because I was so intimate with them, but they probably, the rest of the world wouldn't have seen that shit. And I'm suggesting that there's a lot of people on the left, liberals and the left, who probably have, I'm sure, have fleeting racist thoughts that they feel terrible about, really guilty about. And so, but the way that they process that guilt is by projecting it onto other people and then attacking the other people that will annihilate them so that we don't ever see the actual original racist thought that caused this spasm of violence and craziness. You know what I mean? So,
but it doesn't also have to be just, it doesn't also have to just be like the political left, right? I mean, it's a lot of people. I mean, I remember when one of your interviews, and I don't remember the name, but you interviewed a guy that did like, I don't know, it was either analytics for like internet stuff or internet searches. And yeah, I remember he just kind of said like, oh yeah. Oh yeah, there's a lot of like racist, everybody looks up racist stuff on the internet and things like that. And I remember just thinking like, I wasn't surprised, but okay. I mean, but also to me, it's like, so what? Okay. All right.
Right.
Okay.
And also white people are by far the least racist. So in this country, I mean, don't you think?
I think it's probably even everybody's racist. Who isn't like somewhat like, yeah. Like, come on. It's just the word racism. I don't like everybody stereotypes because everybody. So what to me is like, if you don't laugh at a joke, then you're weird.
Hold on. Wait, let me take that back. Let me rephrase that. What I meant was white people express racism less than any other group in this country. That's for damn sure. Right?
I could see that for sure. And maybe I would say because in the race that started the game of government, white people started the race first, and then other people started getting their voting rights, and they're trying to catch up. And so yeah, when you get a head start in the game, you don't have to project it. You already know you got it. You started the game a little bit ahead of everybody. So yeah. So I mean, yeah, I can see that, but it doesn't. I mean, everybody laughs at stereotypical jokes and shit like that, man. It's fun. It's I mean, everybody laughs.
No, I was just about to say ethnic joke. This is why ethnic jokes, I think, are so important, because there are differences. I don't think they're biological or innate or whatever, but there are definite cultural differences, right? Like there are definite cultures and there are definite differences between them. And I fucking love those fucking cultures and I love the differences between them. And I find them hilarious, the differences between the cultures, and I always have. And so that's all they are. That's all those, most of them are just, mostly that ethnic or even racial jokes are just that.
Just talking shit. Just people talking shit. It's
white. And the thing is, like, white people, like, they've been the brunt of those jokes like for like 50 years, man. There's never been like, you know what I mean? White people get their asses kicked in the world of ethnic jokes, right? That's what black comics fucking make their bones on. That they make their bones on like making fun of white people. I love that shit.
No, I hear you, man. Yeah, I saw Eddie Griffin about a couple months ago, because here in I've been trying to live my COVID life the best that I can, and my wife and I went to go see Eddie Griffin, and that he was talking some shit, and some white people came in late, right? They came in late and sat in the front, and he was like, What the fuck? You guys are late. We're the ones that are supposed to be late going to, that shit was
yeah,
funny,
yeah.
that shit's funny.
Right.
It's funny.
Right. Yeah. I know. Yeah. No, Richard Pryor started it. He was the first one, I'm pretty sure, who would he would imitate white people on stage, and and basically it was all about how uptight and puritanical white people are. And I was like, yep, correct. And that set me off. And I was like, when I saw that movie, when I saw live in concert Richard Pryor back in the 70s, that kind of began Thaddeus Russell. That put that in my head. I was like, oh shit, there's black people. Because I was also really getting into black culture at that time. I was like, God damn, yeah, right. That's the difference. Like white people are like uptight and repressed, and black people are like freer with their bodies and shit, And I'm like, oh, that's why I like that. I like that. I like them and I like their culture, much better than this bullshit. Like school was white culture. I fucking hated that shit. But the street I lived on, Otis Street, which was mostly black kids, even though they tormented me sometimes for being the one white boy, nonetheless, I was listening to soul music and shit, and when I was a kid, and listening to the lingo, and just being around that was yeah, immeasurably valuable for me.
Yeah,
What I got from growing up around black kids when I was a kid was huge.
So from Otis Street to Ivy League school, how did you get into something like that? Because I would have, I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure I've never met you personally. We've had our relationship, on the phone and on online, but I mean, you're the only PhD person I know. I don't know anybody else has a PhD and stuff like that. You have that. I mean, I don't know, but I think it's cool. But I mean, I don't know. You might know more people, but I don't know anybody like that.
So my story is all chopped up, I guess. It doesn't make any sense in a whole bunch of ways. It's all full of contradictions, right? So yeah, so I spent, as I said, about half my childhood on Otis Street. And although the schools were all integrated, so I was always around black kids my whole childhood, and Berkeley in general was really integrated, but Otis Street, I lived at Otis Street for half my childhood. The other half was my dad had a nice house, nothing crazy, but a nice house in the foothills, which is now worth probably definitely over $1 million. But back then it was just a middle class neighborhood. But it was nice, and we're white, and it was almost all white up there. So, and then it's Berkeley, so it's full of professors. So, and then also my parents were all intellectuals, right? They weren't academics, they weren't professional, but they'd all been to college, and they were Marxists. So they fucking sat around talking about fucking Marxist theory all the time, and politics and philosophy and history and yada yada and art. So I was just surrounded by that shit, and that's why I am who I am. I'm sure. I'm sure I was just surrounded by that way of thinking, that way of talking, those interests, and I took them on and I imitated them. So
what were the I mean, but what were the good things you imitated? What were the things you take away that were positive?
I was gonna say it wasn't such a huge leap for me to go to the Ivy Leagues eventually, right? Because I had that kind of elite culture very, very much. My especially my mother and stepfather were big snobby Europhiles. They loved anything European, especially French stuff. They were Francophiles, really.
Dad, what is Francophile? Franco what? What did you say?
Francophile just means love of French thing.
Oh, okay.
Francophilia is love. Francophilia is the love of French things. So my parents were Francophiles. They loved French stuff. My stepfather actually was lived in Paris when he was a kid for a while, for several years. So, and he speaks French. So they had this high culture shit, right? And my stepfather went to university. They all went to fancy universities. They all went to elite universities also. So I had that, you know what I mean? So it wasn't, so I talked the talk. I spoke the same language. I spoke the same way. But I was lost in school, and my parents were totally checked out trying to win the revolution instead of being parents. So they just let me fucking literally wander the streets. I mean, I did wandered the streets since I was like 5, just by myself, you know. I mean, that was also back in the 70s when that was more like legitimate, but so like I had no formal training at all in anything, and because I was completely checked out in school. Like I didn't learn any grammar. I still don't know grammar. I don't know the rules of grammar, Carlos. I swear to God. I
Hey,
swear to God. Like I know
we're on the same team, dude. We're on the same team. I don't even know how to fucking spell and read.
I figured dude. I was I know what a verb and I know like what a verb and a noun and an adjective and an adverb is, and that's about it. Like I don't get. Yeah, isn't that wild? People like are blown away when they hear that. I was an Ivy League professor. I'm an author of 2 books. I have another third one coming. Major, you know, presses of, you know, blah blah blah. So, but I had no fucking formal training because no one paid attention to me. And I was in these fucking factory public schools, which you haven't talked about, you know, which were just a joke. And my teachers were all like Kamala Harris, these authoritarian black ladies who wanted to like get their, I guess. I swear to God, it was what was going on in part. But so
But you became
anyway, so
you became part of that.
confirmation.
But you became part of that, right? You became a college professor. I mean, so
Yeah, I know.
you
Yeah, I got the ultimate revenge. Yeah.
Speak of that. What do you mean? Meaning what? Like what? I mean, you're saying that, but like what?
I showed those motherfuckers because I mean, I had a bus driver when I was like being bussed across town. I was like in 5th grade or something, telling me that I'd never amount to anything. I mean, no teacher ever once said anything positive about me. Like, it never said I was a good writer, never said I had any talent, never encouraged me, never said shit. And I got like straight C's and D's and F's. I was severely disciplined on a regular basis, like all through school. I like was a truant. I played hooky constantly. I was like just ridiculous. I didn't learn a fucking thing. I mean, really nothing. And so I came out of high school just ass ignorant, like truly, like, but clearly with a lot of talent. Just no one said anything. No one ever once said, "Hey, Thad, you know, maybe you should go to college." Swear to God, like my parents didn't even like bring it up. Can you fucking believe that? Like they never even brought up that I should go to college. So I was like, huh. I remember my buddy was like walking down the street one day and I was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm going to take the SAT." I said, "What's the SAT?"
Oh,
I didn't
really?
know what
Like
the fucking
that?
SAT. Yo, I didn't know what the SAT was.
Oh shit! Even I knew what I mean. At college wasn't like a big thing, but man, like that for you, because
I'm
especially
talking
coming
senior.
from coming from an intellectual stuff, like you're saying, like a
Yeah. That's how fucked up my parents were. That's how checked out they were. I'm talking that was September of my senior year. I didn't know what the SAT was. And then I took like the next SAT and then but like I didn't know. It's so fucking sad. Like I didn't know how to take it. I didn't like, and no one like tutored me on it or anything. And so I like sat there like reading. The first thing you learn is you memorize the instructions, so you don't spend any time reading the instructions before you answer, right? So like I was like, I didn't even know it was on the SAT. I didn't know it was like divided into those sections. You know, one was verbal, blah, blah. Know anything about it. So I got like really mediocre, like 540, 530 on my SAT, my first one. People love to hear that. They can't believe it. They think I'm lying. I swear to God. Then I retook it. I got 630, 620, which is like good, but like not great. I mean, like I wouldn't have gotten into like all the schools I've taught at. That's the funny shit. I've taught at 5 colleges and universities. I would not have ever been admitted to any one of them as under.
So you were throwing chingazos, dude. You were throwing chingazos, man.
Yeah, so I have a chip on my shoulder, you know, because I had to like do that all on my own. I got no one's encouragement, no one's recognition, no one's nothing. I had to realize I took a year off after high school just to basically sit and like, I realize now, basically just to like figure out whether I was smart. Because no one told me. I didn't know. I was just sitting around I just smoked weed and I worked at like stupid retail jobs for minimum wage and like I basically did nothing for a year. But like I remember that year like thinking, am I smart? Like, I don't know, you know, should I
Damn.
do this? Should I go to college? And I did, but I did remember like finally like remember sitting on my porch thinking one day, yeah, no, I got to do this. And then I started studying for the SAT and I retook it and got this much higher score. And then I got into this college and whatever. The rest is history, but long winding road from there too. But at least like I got on the track at that point. And from then on, I never stopped. Like the second I touched down in college, I started running and I haven't stopped since. Like I've been doing the same shit basically since I was 19. Like I just like as soon as I started college, I was like, oh, give me the books. Let's go. Let's start talking about ideas. Let's like, what's the radical take on this? What's the radical take on that? Like, let's examine everything. I was like ultra curious. I was like, I want to hear the best like argument for conservatism, the best argument for socialism, the best argument for liberalism. Let's have it out. Let's have debates. Let's like, like intellectual dude. I was into it. Like that shit was like watching like, Ali Frazier for me, like watching like a high level intellectual debate was the same as like gave me as much of a rush as watching like a high level boxing match. But I didn't, I got some of that, and enough to turn me on.
Well, just so you know that when I signed up for the unregistered underground at the time, many years ago, you had signing up for it. I got a free book, and just so you know, part of like the chingazos and fire of this of the podcast, I'm a boxing fan, and I guess maybe you knew that at the time, but when you sent me your book, you had put keep your hands up, right? And when I took that, and it was already this thought in my mind that yeah, I also like ideas to throw chingazos at each other, and thank you for that. It was probably a little seed to get to a point where I'm interviewing you today, and you just never know how those things play out, so it's kind of cool. So speaking of the book here, how do you get to a point where you don't know grammar? You got the chip on your shoulder, you're throwing chingazos, you're in school and all that stuff, but you got a book, a renegade history of the United States. How do you get to this point, and what is this about?
I thought we were going to talk about boxing for a second. I got excited. I watched Canelo's fight finally last night, the last one. That was impressive. He's always impressive. But anyway, we'll get to that. Because Saunders was more impressive than I thought he would be. He had a much better jab than I expected. So I thought Canelo like he gave Canelo the business there, and Canelo was like, "Fuck no." He imposed his will and his tremendous skill. That was awesome. Well, how did I get to Renegade? So I go to this hippie college in Ohio called Antioch. Have a great time there, as I said. Took off, became an intellectual, realized I wanted to do that. I realized I wanted to have my own college back then, by the way. That's the origin of Renegade University. Swear to God, I just told the story the other day, like first month, I think, when I was in college, I was like I was in a class and I was like, you know what? I'd be teaching this a different way right now. And then I suddenly realized that I was like doing that in all my classes all the time. I was thinking about how I would be teaching this differently and better. And that's, in other words, I was realizing that I was a teacher, like,
or an entrepreneur, future entrepreneur.
Both very much. Yeah. Which is unusual. That's really unusual. Like there's very few who are both, right? So I kind of, I did really well there. I had just an amazing time, best time of my life. And spent a year at the London School of Economics when I was there. That was my student. So, I got some confidence from that. That was a real challenge. That was like going to boot camp for a year. That was like, because I wasn't sure. I was at this little stupid, like third rate hippie school, so being the best student there didn't mean that much. So I tested myself, and there was this program where I could, for the same amount of money, I could go spend a year at the London School of Economics, which is this very prestigious, very hardcore academic institution in London. And
that's badass, man. That's pretty cool. That's cool.
Yeah,
that badass.
It was scary as shit. It was a hard year, but like I learned a lot because I was so scared. I mean, because all the professors were famous, and you'd have these little seminars, and they'd be like, "So Carlos, what do you think about Russell's thesis on page 186 of Renegade History? Do you think that holds up against the bubble?" And you're like 20 years old. I was 20, like I was a junior. Fucking ridiculous. Terrified. Dude was on he was on the BBC the night before.
Oh shit, hell yeah.
And
That's
I'm like,
badass.
and I'm remember, I had like a C average in high school. My story, I came from this shitty little college, like, and all the American kids were all from Harvard and Yale and Stanford and shit. And then all the British kids were brilliant. But I did okay. I wasn't a superstar, but I did well. And I learned a lot though. And I learned how to be serious. I learned how to like really read and really get an argument. And like, and God, I learned so much that year just from the fear of being like exposed in a classroom. So, and I got some major confidence, and realized I should go to grad school, and realized I should be an academic. Yeah. I was thinking about being a journalist for a while. Had some internships. My college had this great internship program. Did 6 internships where you live in a city and like have these great jobs. So I was an intern for the Associated Press on Capitol Hill. I worked in the Capitol building.
Oh, cool.
I was rubbing elbows with all those fucking senators and Congress people. Like I saw Bernie Sanders all the time. I saw Joe Biden all the time, like right next to me when I was like 20 years old. Where was I going with that?
Well, you were well, what did you think at the time? How did you measure up? Like, how did you measure them? Like, if it was like what did you like? Or do people get like what is it? I don't know, starstruck, or like, oh, that's this, or were you just there working, or was it a little bit of both? I mean, I've never heard you talk about being in there in the mix. What were you thinking? Like, you had ambition for what? To be a journalist, but also you're also checking them too. Right. Like, hey, like what's up with these
journalists? Yeah, journalists. Yeah. So the Associated Press has a bureau inside the Capitol building. And that's where I was a mail boy. So I was just delivering shit. Although they did let me write a couple of little things, but basically the cool part about that job was I just was there. I was like, got to go everywhere because I was the mail boy. So I got to, and there was a lot of downtime, and it was cool. You can just like, people don't realize this, when you're in Congress, you can like just go to like meetings and shit. Like it's all open. So you just like walk in and there's like Dianne Feinstein, like holding a fucking, or Chuck Schumer, or whoever, holding a hearing, like right there, you can reach out and touch them all, at least back then. I don't know how security is now, but certainly then it was. And then there's like all these elevators and little like stairwells and shit. And you're just like literally like shoulder to shoulder, with them all the time. I mean, I was like a democratic socialist then. So my fantasies then were about taking over the Democratic Party and making it like a really left-wing socialist, like social democratic party, like Bernie Sanders kind of party. Like Bernie, I was down with Bernie then for sure. He wasn't anything then. He wasn't shit. He was in the Congress, but no one knew him. So I finally was into left-wing politics, did some activism after college, came back here to Berkeley and did like commie worked for some commie outfits. Labor Network on Central America. Can you imagine that shit? Like, what an obvious communist front group. Totally what we were. Totally supporting the Sandinistas, and even worse, the FMLN, which was the Salvadoran one. FMLN or the FSLN, I forget. FMLN, I think. The Salvadoran communist movement that was crushed by Reagan. I mean, they were like really bad. They were really Stalinist.
Oh, okay. So now you're saying Reagan. See, because I don't know a lot of this stuff, so I'm hearing you out. But you say Reagan and Sandinistas, and then I start thinking of Narcos and how like they, on the Narcos, but at least like on the corridos that I listened to, how they killed Kiki Camarena because he probably got into some shit looking and found out that there was a lot of drug movement and money movement and shit like that. So that's how I know it, but I don't know it like the way you know it, like on that front, like you were.
Which front?
Saying that you were doing commie work.
Oh, yeah.
Unless you say right now, oh yeah, I was moving, I was in the fucking planes too. I mean, you're not gonna say that you were like, I don't think so, but maybe you might say, oh shit, yeah, I know what's up, but I don't know. But
So wait, okay. So no. I'm talking about, okay. So what was going on in the 80s? The big scene on the left, like in politics in the 1980s, what everybody cared about was Central America. That was the big shit in the 80s. This is before Iraq. Like this was Iraq before Iraq. Like, you know what I mean? Like anybody who was like left or libertarian, that's where the action was Central America. So we were all, anybody who was anti-war, was primarily focused on Central America in the 80s.
To stop communism, right? To stop the communists taking over
yeah,
these regimes, right?
Reagan's, communists they were advancing in El Salvador and Nicaragua, and they took control in Nicaragua eventually, the Sandinistas. And the civil war in El Salvador was even more vicious, just terrible. And that, as I said, I think that's the FMLN, that communist movement, they damn near took control. But Reagan funneled a shit ton of military equipment to the Salvadoran government and death squads and et cetera, and they slaughtered people in the jungle. So here's, were you there when I said this? You might have been there. Like, so in the late 80s, I was involved in that. Like I was an activist, and that's what we did. So the group I worked for, the Labor Network on Central America, we brought together in coalition and held events together with activists in El Salvador and Nicaragua, and communist trade union activists in the United States. Like it was, I was part of the communist revolution in Central America. Like I helped in a small way, but that's totally that's what we were doing. We were like, yeah, some of the trade unions in those countries were affiliated with the communist movements, and we helped basically get money to them. What's hilarious is that now, and I just said this the other night, I said, I've been thinking about this, and I watched all the Narcos and all that shit, if I were in El Salvador, motherfucker, in 1980, whatever, and the communists were about to take over, give me a gun and tell me which death squad to join. Because I am not living under those motherfuckers. Hell no. So now, because like when I was in the movement back then, right-wing death squad, like they were considered to be like the worst human beings on earth, right? Those were like the Nazis of our time. Like, oh my God, those were the right-wing death squads of El Salvador. Now I'm like, wait, because I think they depicted them in one of the Narcos, and I was like, they did, right? Yeah,
I'm thinking.
I'm pretty sure they did, and they were like the really scary, the ultra scary dudes. But I'm like, yo, I don't know about Colombia, but definitely in El Salvador, if those motherfuckers are taking over, your life is hell or dead. And so taking up guns and shooting them in the jungle, like you need to, unless you are a communist like that. Are you? No one is anymore. So anyway, that's how far I've come. Like like I would join a communist a right-wing death squad, like to fucking keep when 30 years ago I was like funding the communists, helping fund the communists. I had no money myself. I was facilitating that.
That's no, man, I don't think I've heard you speak on that too much. But you might have
Never told that.
No, I've never
told that story. Not like that either.
Oh, all right. Thanks, man. Thanks for a little exclusive. Your little something here for los Libertinos here. No, that's interesting, man. No, the narco stuff only just showed me that governments, if they cut budgets, which they cut the budget on all of those things to Reagan, that they will figure out a way to get money to, if they want to continue their policy. And they'll, that's where like all that Iran-Contra shit started, like funneling money and all that, right? So to me, when I watched that, because I'm like a fiscal money guy, I just thought, yeah, okay, you if you cut some budgets, the swamp creatures will definitely come out looking for how they can get their money still. regardless of whatever, however they got to do it. So that's what I took from when I heard about that stuff. But I mean, that sounds like you were more into that shit. I mean, I was a little kid at that time, you know?
Oh yeah, no, I know. Yeah, yeah. Well, also you were never on the left. You were never part of that culture, right?
I mean, yeah, my parents were Democrats and all that stuff.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, my first like role,
well,
like political stuff was like Bill Maher. I still watch Bill Maher. I like Bill Maher, you know? So I come from like thinking of like, at least whatever that is,
that's
but, you know, I've always been an entrepreneur my whole life. So, you know,
your parents are like mainstream Democrats, though,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
They're
yeah. It
not.
was just basically Democrats are for the poor, Republicans are for the rich. That's
Yeah,
simple.
no, but that's not the left. That's not the left. I mean, they wouldn't have been like talking about the
No,
Sandinistas and shit.
no,
Yeah,
they're just watching
definitely.
novelas, dude. I mean, if anything came out
Yeah,
about like some stuff like that, I don't even remember
yeah,
any of that. That was not no. Your parents were way, or you grew up in this stuff, man. Like that wasn't what
right.
we got into.
Yeah.
Visit PalomaVerdeCBD.com for all of your CBD needs. Get 25% off everything in their store by using the promo code Renegade.
Yeah, that was my
So
church.
but how do we get to
Oh, so
this?
yeah. All right. All right. So I got oh yeah, so while I was doing the communist organizing, I was
Oh yeah, just
deciding
that thing, just that thing.
yeah, during that, yeah, that's what I did. God, it's fucking crazy. I mean, it had like whatever I did had like this much effect on the world, you know what I mean? But still, that is totally what I was doing. I was paid to do that. I was staff. That was my job. It was a full-time job. Anyway, during that time, it was 2 years. And also this was the first Gulf War. So I was like, the anti-war movement here was like enormous. This was like the San Francisco shit is like huge. We blocked the Bay Bridge several times. I did get arrested once. I almost got arrested a second time when I should have been arrested because I was blocking the Bay Bridge. Almost got myself killed. So it was like being in the anti-war movement at that time it was almost like Vietnam at that time. Like we were in the streets every day for like weeks back then. This was in January 91, right before Desert Storm. We were trying to stop Desert Storm, and we blocked all the streets in downtown San Francisco. It was huge, and that was during that time too. So, I was really just a professional lefty activist. That was I was like super political. I was like professionally political, basically. And like totally on the left. Anyway, but during that time I was deciding, because if you're on the left, there aren't too many options in the world. Um, I was deciding between law school and going to get a PhD in history. Because I've realized I wanted to study history. I was interested in history toward the end of my college years. I was a philosophy guy and then politics and then history at the end. And at the end, I was like, oh no, history is the shit. You got to know history to win an argument. You got to know history. You just have to know history to be good at politics. To make any serious political analysis, you got to know history, or I cannot take you seriously.
I've heard you say that. Is that like the body work? Is that the body work? Like you have the history that's putting in the body work in a debate or something like that? Yeah.
So,
I don't have that skill, but I would still at least try to throw some body shots but yeah, I've heard you say that.
Well, I mean, I would say though, actually, you cannot achieve a knockout, in my view, without knowledge of history. Like, I'm not. In other words, I'm not going to be fully convinced of your argument unless you incorporate history in it. It's like one of my many beefs with Sam Harris. The dude knows nothing, not a goddamn thing about history before 2000. Anyway, so I was deciding between PhD in history and law school. I had given up on journalism. Associated Press. The reason I brought that up was that like the journalists there convinced me not to do journalism because they were like old crusty dudes who were like, "Don't do it, kid. The pay sucks." And also like, it was just I realized that all they were doing was like they were fucking stenographers for the two parties. I mean, they just like took whatever like press release came out of some fucking senator's office and rewrote it. Basically, I mean it wasn't what I want. I was into like, I want to do like investigative, analytical, political journalism, right? So anyway, so I applied to graduates. I decided on history because law sounded like too much work. Just and lawyers seemed really miserable to me, and like just I knew the work when I heard the work hours of most lawyers, I was like, fuck that, I cannot, no way. 60, 70, 80 hours, for years and years, sometimes their entire lives. Fuck that. And it's, by the way, it's true. Like I've known a lot of lawyers in my life since then, and it's true. In like every case, they don't know their kids. They don't like, they don't know their kids. Like they don't have a bond with their kids. That's what they gave up for that. Now they make like $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year, and no one ever has to worry about money ever, and that's no small matter. But they don't have a bond with their kids. Anyway, so I made the right move because I do have a bond with my kid. Even though I've been really busy, I was never that busy, never that kind of busy where I have to be in a fucking office, right? An office, like fully physically away from your family for 60, 70 hours a week. God damn. Anyway, so I applied to all the top graduate programs in history, like 10 of them, the top 10, I think it was like the top 10. And I got rejected by all of them. In a way, I really did get rejected by all of them. Columbia, however, had this weird thing where this weird, like really exploitative thing where they would give they so you can live. You don't have to, so you're full-time. So you're full-time study. So you're studying full-time. Columbia did this thing where like they gave some fellowships and then they also let some people in without fellowships and made them pay the full tuition, which was like 20 grand or something like that. Maybe 18, something like that. Just to milk them, right? And then, but they did hold out like one fellowship from the cream of that crop of all the non-funded students. At the end of the first year, the best one would get that fellowship. So that was me. I got that fellowship. So that was definitely one of the top 3 or 4 turning points in my life. I mean, in terms of my career, that was it. I mean, I don't think I could have gotten to where I've gotten without that. Because that was still to this day, really the only time pretty much an elite institution has really stated that they value or esteem my work or my ability. That was like the only time that an elite institution really sort of gave me its seal of approval. So, but most importantly, it just allowed me to continue. Like I would have had to leave grad school because I couldn't afford to pay that shit every year, So yeah, that was the shit, man. And it gets more complicated. There's a dark little detour, but ultimately it worked out and I did well. I did really well. Dissertation was fine. And there's all kinds of things to be said, but I started to make my intellectual turn toward the end of graduate school. I was there for years teaching, doing all sorts of stuff at Columbia while I was doing my dissertation. And I kind of just let those ideas percolate without really telling them. And they thought I was great because I was talented and I could write well and I was a really good teacher. And so they kept giving me jobs and all these things. I like helped write their textbooks for them. I like ghost wrote somebody's book. I did all kinds of, the faculty at Columbia really, they let me into the club. They gave me the sweetest jobs. And then I got this great thing where I got to teach full time at Barnard, the women's college, which is part of Columbia. It's attached to Columbia, right across the street. And I was there for 6 years. And during that time, I developed all the ideas that you have in your hand right there. Renegade history. Yeah. While I was teaching at Barnard, I started to look at American history through new lenses. And in particular, the lens of the fight between individuals and their desires and the American community and its demands. And by looking at it through that lens, I just saw a whole new story. Like, it's just amazing. It was like putting a filter over a lens or something, and then suddenly you see all these things that you couldn't see before, and it's just like this whole new story emerged right away for me. And I started making those into lectures, and I lectured to the students at Columbia, and I had like lecture halls of 180 students at one point. I was teaching the Introduction to American History course for all Columbia history majors, and because they didn't know what I was teaching, the faculty don't check on each other, so they had no idea that I was talking some shit. They had no idea that I was wilding out on their fucking precious little children. That I was teaching them that, the slaves were free and the prostitutes were feminists and all this crazy nonsense. Yeah. I mean,
so that was part that so that is, you bringing that up, and that's part of like your book. So yeah, I mean, so let's get into that a little bit, because a lot of my audience won't know, right? So now they know, all right, this guy got up. He's been down, but he got up, and he's here to a point where, he's getting his own fighting style. He's putting his own style to it, even to maybe even teach it to other people, at least of that fighting style or that filter or whatever you want to call it. But why are the whores, the drunkards, the gangsters, the freedom fighters of our time, and why aren't we taught that they are? And why are you going to teach us that they are?
Can I give you another exclusive instead?
Let's do it.
That's not about that, but it's an exclusive that I've never told anyone.
Let's do it.
So this thing about me not knowing if I was smart or not. Remember that? Like, I just didn't know. I was never sure that I was not smart, but I just didn't know if I was smart. I just didn't know. My whole childhood, like all the way through my childhood, I just really didn't know. And I never did well in school, so I never got any reason from that to believe I was smart. I never took it. No one ever gave me a test and showed me like a high score on it or anything. And people didn't tell me I was smart, most importantly, So doing the thing with the SAT, that was one turning point. So I felt like, okay, I can at least like get into a college. That was a turning point. Getting into the LSE, as I told you, that was a big turning point. And then getting into Columbia, turning point. Getting the fellowship at Columbia, really big turning point. Even after that, though, what I'm trying to say here, after all those affirmations, basically, where like institutions are not just saying, "Oh, you're a smart boy," but like putting resources and funds into your ass. You know what I mean? Even then, all through graduate school, I still felt like these cats know more than I do. These cats are like on top of their game. They've got the A game, I've got the B game. Like they're the starters on the bench at best, like until my dissertation defense, which is a trippy experience where you write your dissertation and then you go in and for 2 hours you sit at a table with like 4 to 5 to 6 usually esteemed scholars.
Hey, Dad, and I got to cut you just real quick because I got to tell you that a lot of people aren't going to even know what a dissertation is. Like my audience, man, They're not even going to know. So just go give a little, hey, this is what it is. Because you're about to talk about, it sounds like you're about to talk about some chingazos right now. So like, set it up, like, because people don't know this,
A dissertation is just a really big academic paper that you have to write to get a PhD. It's usually basically the length of a book, and many of them become books, as a matter of fact. In fact, mine did. So that's what it is. So you write that to get a PhD. It's the final step to getting a PhD so you can become a college professor. So I'm at the dissertation defense, and like I got all these like very famous professors all around the table, like and all they're there to do is to rip my shit up. It was a Shark Tank because
the purpose. That's their purpose that is their purpose, because you said
their purpose is to determine whether it's good or not.
Okay.
But here's the thing. So my politics had changed, and I had adopted some libertarian ideas by then, and there's some libertarian ideas in that dissertation. And they were not having that because libertarian ideas are not cool at all in the academy. They're not cool at all in universities. Professors hate that shit. are left wingers, they're all socialists, they're all liberals, they fucking hate every speck of it. I didn't know anything about libertarian philosophy. I came across it totally accidentally, like fucking stumbled on it. And I was like, oh, that's cool. It makes sense. Yeah. Whoa, it really makes sense. And I applied it to this study. I wrote up and they weren't having it. And they were like, basically like, nope, we're not going to allow this shit because we don't like the politics. And they had the dumbest fucking arguments because all they had was like political objections instead of principled intellectual objections. And I saw that they were not smarter than me, that they weren't more not, in fact, and less knowledgeable than me. And that was all of a sudden I felt like myself rising up like Eminem in that video. Is it Rap God, I think, where he starts to like elevate in the air? I felt like that. I felt like I started to like elevate in the room, and I looked down on them for the first time. And that was the first time in my life. I was 30 something years old. And the first time in my life, I felt like, oh yeah, I'm smart. And like, yeah, I should do this. This is, yeah. I felt real confidence, like a deep confidence, I should say.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Anyway, you felt it in that way. You elevated your existence.
Yeah, I didn't. Well, I didn't know I had it in me. I didn't until I went through it. I mean, if I hadn't done the work, if I hadn't pushed myself, if I hadn't taken the risks, I would never have known. I wanted to know, I guess, in a way, like how smart I was. So I really didn't know until then.
And what happened? Like, therefore what? Then how did it, you got this feeling, and then whatever. So what happened afterwards? Because at that time, now you're saying that you're now a different person. So then what happened afterwards, after that? Your dissertation and all that.
I went on a rampage on the motherfuckers without them knowing about it. So, so sure, they didn't know, and the people at Barnard didn't know about me. They just thought they knew I could teach well. They knew I was a good teacher. So is my internet all right?
But it is what it is.
I'm sorry. Damn. So let's see. So I went across the street, started teaching at Barnard, and developing these lectures that became the book. And I think that's the story.
So could
no, and the end is me getting fired. I mean, and that's the dramatic part. So they didn't know it. Oh, okay. You asked me what happened after the dissertation. So I got the job at Barnard. I started developing these ideas, these crazy ideas that like as Thaddeus Russell, today. And I started teaching them. They don't sit in on each other's classes. They don't know what's going on. And it's weird. It's just the weirdest industry. People don't know this, but like, but then, and my classes were blowing up. I was doing really well. Like they gave me I became the director of the American Studies program, But then a tenure track line came open for exactly my job, meaning that like it was going to become a permanent job. My job was going to become a permanent job, but I had to apply for it. They weren't going to give it to me. And it had to be a national search, a national competition to fill this job. So they opened it up and like hundreds of people applied, and I applied, and I gave a job talk, which was like, as a finalist, you have to give a lecture to the faculty to get this job. And I got up there and I gave my stuff about Martin Luther King being an assimilationist, wanting to make Black people white culturally. And I had all the receipts in the world. And half the people were like, oh my God, that's the most brilliant thing I've ever heard. But other people went straight home and wrote all these emails saying that I was a piece of shit and that I had no business being in the academy, no business being a professor, that I was a disgrace, that inappropriate, all this stuff. And they did not give me the job, and they gave it instead. or they tried to give it to a woman who didn't even teach American studies, American cultural history, which is what that is. She taught something totally different. She also didn't have a PhD yet. Can you believe that? But she was Black. So I was later told that the faculty hated my ideas. I was also told that the chair of the search committee announced that she would not hire a man. I was also, before it started, I was also told that I was not allowed to say things about Black people that I did. Those are the reasons I didn't get that job.
So I want to be respectful of your time, and I'd like to know that because we have a lot to talk about, and I'd like to have you back on the show. But for the purposes of respecting your time and all that, I'd like to ask you one last question, and it's basically to tie this interview together, and it's to say, with all of that, how do you become a Black drag queen historian?
I'm trying to remember. God, how did I get into that? Well, let's see. After my dissertation, I was teaching at Barnard.
And I'm only asking because some intellectual that I know had told me that sometimes it's good to start off with bringing that up in the beginning and closing it up at the end.
Circle back.
Some vato that I know.
That's a smart dude right there. You should listen to him more often. I don't know. My next project after my dissertation was on the civil rights movement. So I started studying the civil rights movement, and I was like, this thing is different than what people think it was. That there was this, and by the way, I mean, it's happened in all kinds of other movements too, but this like relentless drive to assimilate, to like adopt the culture, the dominant culture, to eliminate your own culture completely, usually is what it means, and to which has always been white culture. And that's what Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement was all about. They were explicit about it. They said that shit. It was like straight up. It wasn't even, but it's been ignored. People didn't want to talk about that. It was like, no. It's like, oh, but they got civil rights. That's all we need to know, No, they wanted to eliminate, like Martin Luther King was embarrassed by jazz music until like the 1960s. Like he thought that was too Black and weird. You know what I mean? Like too non-respectable. So that's what I started looking into, and that's what got me into trouble. That's one thing they couldn't stand at Columbia. They just, oh my God, could not stand that shit. Martin Luther King? What? Impossible. You can't say negative things about Martin Luther King. So I forget how I got into the queer piece of it, but I got interested in queer theory, and we don't have time to get into that, but well, it meant that I got into sort of sexuality, like what sexuality means in a society and what it says about a society or a movement, social movement like the civil rights movement. So I looked at, that's a good question. I got to think about this. Where did I?
Well,
anyway, I started
to give you, I mean, some stuff that I've heard you say is like the magazines that in their culture was like had those famous singers. You wrote an article for Reason, right, about the guy that just what's his name, Little Rick, all that kind of like. No, I mean, I've heard you touch upon some of that stuff, but you don't get into it a lot. But I've heard you say it, some of that stuff.
I'm trying to remember how I got into the queer angle. I don't remember what sent me there. I started looking at the civil rights movement as an assimilationist movement, I guess, because I must have seen something about homosexuality and how they were, I mean, Martin Luther King, they were all anti-homosexual as hell. I knew that. And so I guess from there, I was like, well, what were they worried about? And then I started looking at this huge Black gay subculture at the time, and the drag queen movement in it was dominant, and white people flocked to these things to go see them. And I mean, this was like RuPaul's Drag Race back in the day, and we're talking the 1940s, 1950s. And it was fascinating. And the civil rights movement was like, nope, this is terrible. We can't have this. And they put an end to it. And there were these big black preachers, meaning famous black preachers, Prophet Jones and Sweet Daddy Grace, at the time, who were also like Prophet Jones was like flaming homosexual, and Sweet Daddy Grace had like 4-inch long red, white, and blue fingernails, and they both were just queer and popular than Martin Luther King in the 1950s. In the 1950s, most definitely, they had huge audiences. They had like congregations all over the country. They had like radio stations, and they were on TV and Life magazine, and so and the civil rights movement disowned them, set them up. Actually, they hired a police officer in Detroit to offer to give head to Prophet Jones, and then they put him in prison for sodomy. Sweet Daddy Grace, they got a woman to claim that he got her pregnant, and then he was disgraced, and the black press stopped covering both of them right away. And then Martin Luther King rose and said, hey, we're going to wear business suits like white men do, and we're going to speak the way that white men do, and we're going to be Christians the way the white men are, and we're not going to sing like Negroes. We're going to stop singing and stop dancing and all that stuff. So, and he said straight up, we're going to adopt the culture of the dominant white culture. That's it. So that's the drag queens were like not having any of that, right? They were like just this. They were the antithesis of the white culture in every way, and anti-Puritan to the bone. And the civil rights movement could not have black drag queens if they were going to be full-class citizens, right? They're not going to be respected. That was the idea. If we have drag queens among us, so we have to get rid of them, which is what they did.
Yeah, no, the first time that I heard you was on many years ago on Stossel, and you were talking a different story about Martin Luther King. And I remember listening, and I was like, oh man, this guy's talking some shit. And back then I didn't think about Chingazos and Fire, but that's what you were doing back then. So I'd like to thank you for coming on today. I'd like to think that you'd want to come back, and because we have a lot to talk about. We didn't get too much into this, but I think a lot of my audience that hasn't heard some of this would be interesting to hear about different things about the 40-hour work week, the unions, all types of different things, and also if you could like plug in the stuff that you got coming on. I know you got RU Texas, you got shows coming on, you got all kinds of stuff going on in your school. So please plug away all the information where they can reach you and all that.
Yeah, renegadeuniversity.com. Just go there and look at our video courses. We have a lot of live webinars coming up that you can take, and then we have streaming videos that you can watch at any time, and it's on a variety of subjects, ranging from the history of World War II to philosophy to how to make your own 3D printed gun to cryptocurrency to lots of subjects on history and psychology and philosophy. And renegadeuniversity.com.
Yeah, I'm gonna put a link down in the show notes, so you guys click through there and join up, and it'll support Thad's efforts and my efforts. And thank you for go ahead.
Well, wait, hold up, and then the big one, right? Paloma Verde is the sponsor of Renegade University, Texas, which is in Lockhart, which is going to be October 8th to the 10th. And that's also at renegadeuniversity.com. And we have like an amazing lineup of all kinds of incredible people who have all been some of the most popular guests on my podcast, which is called Unregistered.
So yes, thank you, Thad, and appreciate your time. And hopefully we can do this again.
Yes, sir. Anytime, dude. Thank you.
Peace.